deliver a point.
Sure.
You
So
gotta do your checkup from the neck up.
That's right. That's exactly it. That's right. And so, yeah, depending on who you learn from and who's your heroes, right, in this business, that you learn that. Because like right now, all the people like the Gary Vaynerchuk's of the world, they all sit in the chair and don't do it. I mean, that's their persona. They sit in the chair and give you advice and information. And that's not stage
a content
performance.
creator. He's not a great speaker.
That's right. That's right. And so a lot of people don't know that when they get on a stage, they have to do something different.
I think I when you're speaking about Gary Vee, I remember hearing him in 2014, maybe before that. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I cannot sit through this. Oh, I definitely can't sit through this, because it was coarse. There was nothing there that had been framed. His voice was coarse, everything about what he did. But then I thought that that's his style. But funnily enough, you're speaking about sitting. I did a workshop a few weeks ago on the different ways you would use the stage. And when you may have a chair on the stage, when you might sit at the front of the stage, when you might stand in the middle of the stage and lean forward, they've all got a purpose. Now, I used a chair one of the times I was out, not recently, when I was telling something very emotive. It was very emotive. So I wasn't parading the stage. I walked to the chair and said, I'm going to share something with you that's very sensitive for me, and I haven't shared it before. I'm going to sit down. Would that be a good way to start? And they're all saying, yeah. And that's how I did that for about 10 minutes. But it's not something I've done regularly. But I think you can. The use of a chair, I wouldn't use it the way Gary and some other people have got big, loud, hoarse voices that are very coarse.
Funny. It's funny you say Gary Vee. There have been several, entertainers. I mean, I go back to singers, and I go back to, movie actors and that kind of stuff.
Even
and
professional athletes.
Yeah. When you hear them talk, you're like, I couldn't listen to them very long because their voice is just so gravelly or just so irritating. And yet they go on to make it big a lot of times because they're genuine, because what do they call that? Being authentic. And they have a lot to share, but they have to find their audience, and that audience helps bring other people to them. But boy, if you were to just evaluate them on their own skill as a speaker, you'd say, no way, won't happen.
Steve, a couple of weeks back, we had this conversation. David made the point where he asked the question first, what is the number one most powerful emotion that resonates with people? And someone said love, someone said fear, and the answer was authenticity, because it's very easy to listen to someone who's being authentic, and we sniff out, on the other side of it, someone who's also not being authentic. So as a speaker, if you just don't have that, if you're coming from your head too much, or you're coming from, something, or whatever it may be, you're not coming through authentically, then it's harder to listen to. That's why they say it's, I think I said 80% harder to listen to someone who's reading something during a podcast or an interview. They've got prepared answers. The human ear doesn't hear it as well. The human ear hears the authentic, and blocks out somehow, or can't process as easily that which is prepared or sanitized or prefabricated of any type. Sandy, I'd like to hear from you on that point.
Hold on, I got something to follow that up.
Yeah.
So we bring it up quite a bit, but I've been trained in NLP very thoroughly. One of the people I've studied with is actually a Super Bowl winning player, who's now he's a coach, and he was trying to get into speaking more. He created a whole speech, like he worded it, he wrote it down, and technically, like from a technical standpoint, the speech was phenomenal. And when I was listening to it, it sounded like nails on a chalkboard, because it was completely rehearsed, word for word. and I knew exactly what he was saying, and I was like, wow, that's really good. And at the same time, I was like, bro, just speak from your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
You know,
and
I do a podcast, and people always ask me all the time, do you want to send me the questions? I go, no, we're going to have a
Yeah.
conversation. And that's why it's, you know, because I tell people all the time, I'm going to say something, you're going to answer something, and I'm not going to know the answer. That's what my viewers don't know the answer either. So I'll ask you, well, what do you mean by that? Or how do we get to that place, right? And it's the authenticity of having a conversation rather than rehearsed information.
right.
I think
That's
I think
true.
you're right. I think
One
that
sec, Sheena. Christine had her hand up.
Yeah, I
Go ahead.
I do, because I think this is one of the reasons I'm here. Um, and in my experience, I've had significant positive feedback when I'm fully authentic, but a lot of times my subject matter is so emotional that it's hard for me. And this is one of the things I'm struggling with. I talked about the fact that I do a lot of talking on the care economy. And coming from a family that has people with disability, as a caregiver, it is emotional. And so when I start talking about what that life is like on a personal level, I want to still maintain a professional face. I don't think it does the audience any good to see me standing there crying, and for me, kind of having them feel like they have to care for me. So I'm working on balancing that. And part of it is I know it's my own growth and development in this work that I need to work on. Plain and simple, at times it is hard. I feel at times like this is my soul, this is my life. There is nothing more important to me. And I do believe a caring society really begins to understand this is not transaction. And so I'm just putting it out there because it is something that I struggle with. And I started doing this in my younger years and I just couldn't do it. My first, when I was working on my doctorate, I did a talk on having a sibling who was born severely brain damaged. And I ended up crying. And that, and I didn't do another talk for 10 years. It was like, okay, I'm not going to go there because that's way too painful for me
Christine,
emotionally.
sometimes the answer to that, and I mean, I have people who they say, I wrote a book, I want to do a talk on my book. And I go, that's great. What's your book about? And then they always want to talk about them. They want to talk about themselves. Okay. And the way to avoid the crying, or a way to avoid too much, because sometimes you get your audience too much information or too much emotion, and we back away from that because we don't want to get caught up in it. And so the better way to do that is simply, instead of keep telling people about your story, is to ask them,